Speaker.
Ian Lees-Galloway.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. Labor opposes this bill because it sets in permanent bitumen the National Party's fossilised approach to the transport portfolio, transport infrastructure, and its determination to waste taxpayers' money on monster motorways that serve no real purpose other than to be a monument to this government's profligate spending on outmoded transport infrastructure that harks back to the 1950s era of sprawl and motorways. The central way in which this bill achieves that is by changing the purpose of the current Act. The current Act says that the purpose of the current Act says that it is to contribute to the aim of achieving an affordable, integrated, safe, responsive and sustainable land transport system. Mr Speaker, what could possibly be wrong with that purpose and that aim for our land transport? But this is what the government wants to do away with. And let's have a look at the reasons why. Well, the question of affordability comes up first. Is our land transport system affordable, and are the government's plans affordable? Well, clearly they're not. That's why this government is having to raise fuel excise taxes by 9 cents a litre, increasing the cost of living for hard-working New Zealanders right at the time when they can least afford to face new costs. This government isn't prepared to bring down the cost of electricity, and they are prepared to increase the cost of fuel so that they can pay for their unaffordable monster motorways, their roads of national significance. Is the land transport infrastructure integrated? And integrated, of course, means making sure that different modes of transport can work well together. Well, again, this government doesn't believe in different modes of transport. It only believes there is one way to move people and freight around New Zealand, and that's cars and trucks. It doesn't believe in rail, and it doesn't believe in coastal shipping. So, of course, it doesn't want the purpose of this Act to be that land transport should be integrated, because it simply doesn't believe in it. Does it want to be safe? Well, the government has already withdrawn funding from local councils for their safety promotion programs, so it's making it harder for councils to make their roads and their pedestrian and cycleways safer. But in fact, the government has also indicated that it is prepared to sacrifice the lives of people travelling on local roads, the lives of cyclists and the lives of motorcyclists, so that it can pay for its roads of national significance. So, of course, this government does not want to have safety included in the purpose of this Act. Is it responsive? Well, it certainly won't be responsive to New Zealand's needs. It will be responsive to this government's fixation with roads, but nothing else. And is it sustainable? Well, we know, Mr Speaker, that the least sustainable form of transport is the car, especially the car carrying a single occupant. And so this government, again, has no commitment to a sustainable land transport system. So that's why National Party is gutting the Land Transport Management Act by doing away with all of that and simply narrowing it down to effective, efficient and safe. Well, I don't believe the safe bit, because the government hasn't demonstrated its commitment to safety, and effective and efficient basically just means, does it implement the National Party's fixation on roads? That's all that this bill is about, and that's all the Act will be able to achieve once this bill is passed. Mr Speaker, the other thing that this bill does is it removes the ability for local councils to implement a regional fuel tax if they choose. If they choose. It doesn't commit anybody to, the current Act does not commit anybody to a regional fuel tax, but what this does is takes away that option. Now, we know that the government's program is unaffordable, and that's why it's had to increase fuel taxes to pay for their monster motorways, and they say that that's what it's all about. It's about paying for the roads of national significance. Now, even if we believe that, Even if we believe that, and most people don't, Mr Speaker. Most people think that the increase to the fuel excise tax has a lot more to do with helping this government reach its surplus, because it's failed to actually get the economy moving. So it's got to reach its surplus somehow else, and that's by increasing taxes on ordinary New Zealanders. But even if we believe that it's about building roads, we know that actually only CPI increases are required for the government to meet its roading program. And if they just would take a sustainable approach to transport infrastructure, if they wouldn't stick to their politically motivated program that ensures that a group of projects are started before the next election and another group of projects are started before the election after that, if it would abandon that political motivation and focus on a sustainable approach to land transport, then those excessive increases to fuel taxes would not have been required, and New Zealanders would have just a little bit more left in their back pocket. But we know that sense and planning has nothing to do with this government's approach to land transport infrastructure. It's all about ideological madness. And the next example of the ideological madness is using a public-private partnership to build Transmission Gully. Now this bill allows for greater use of borrowing to build their unaffordable transport infrastructure. They can't afford to pay for it, even with their excessive tax increases, so they need to open up the opportunity for borrowing. Well, a public-private partnership, Mr Speaker, is the worst possible form of borrowing that they could undertake. There is no evidence that a PPP is more efficient or more effective than simply using the public sector model. In fact, that government was not prepared to release the public sector comparator for Transmission Gully. They are not prepared to tell the public how much they think it would cost to build Transmission Gully under the traditional model. And I think the reason for that is because they know that the public-private partnership will not stack up against the traditional model. They have not been able to demonstrate that it will cost less to build it by a public-private partnership. They rely solely on intangible supposed benefits, which simply rely on the theory that the private sector can do it better. Well, Mr Speaker, the evidence just says that's wrong. If you look around the world, all you have to do is look across the Tasman at Australia. We know that public-private partnerships for roading infrastructure have often been a dismal failure. And so we need to get the government actually looking at the real options, not adhering themselves to ideological madness. But we know why they're doing this. We know why they're doing this because look at the enthusiasm from the private sector to provide this money. The enthusiasm was enormous because the private sector saw an opportunity for a low-risk, high-return investment. A low-risk, high-return investment. The government's taken all the risk out of Transmission Gully. It doesn't matter how many people use it. It doesn't matter whether it's the right road, whether people end up using it or not. The private investors will get their money, and it's going to cost New Zealand $2 billion more than it ought to. It's going to cost New Zealand taxpayers $2 billion more than it needs to. Why? So that the National Party can provide a low-risk, high-return investment for their mates. That's who it's about, not New Zealanders, not road users, not public transport users. This is all about the National Party's mates. That's what it's about. Mr Speaker, over on this side of the House, we believe in an integrated system. We believe that roads are important, we believe that rail is important, and we believe that coastal shipping is important, sir. We do need an integrated system. That's why the purpose of this Act should be about building an affordable, safe and integrated integrated system that is sustainable, and that is what this government is taking away with this bill. It's going to ruin our transport infrastructure. It locks us into a 1950s vision of transport, this fossilised government that is stuck in the past, and it is going to be detrimental to the economy up and down New Zealand as New Zealanders are forced to pay for this madness and for monster motorways, sir.
David Bennett.